this takes us into our final panel session, and I'm delighted to see that a number of our speakers from today are still with us, which is great. And what we're going to do is we're going to just share some of our thoughts and feelings on what's sitting in our heads right now, because we've listened to a wide variety of talks over the course of the last couple of hours. So we started off with Freudis, who was sharing with us things like, so risk is a social process, which makes a whole load of people who are professional risk managers within, say, mining companies or whatever, cringe, because they're like, no, it's all about my impact likelihood matrix and criteria and everything like that. But I'm totally with you, Froy. It is very much that human process. But more than that, it's all about the context and the fact that that context is by no means static. It is constantly changing as well. And if we're not being, or we're not acknowledging that context, then we're probably doing that risk management in a parallel universe rather than where we're actually at this precise second in time. Cara then gave us a fabulous insight to the world of DFN, or discrete fracture networks. Yes, everybody, you will be tested on that later. And I think that was a case of, it's not just about how rocks fracture, but what you showed us, Cara, was how do we use physics, science, understanding to really say, no, I know that there's uncertainty with regards to what's going to happen to this rock, but let's apply degrees of confidence with regards to understanding how much it's going to fracture, or in what ways it's going to fracture as well. So from Freudis's presentation, where it's like, no, this is a very human thing, Cara then said, yep, but we can use science, etc., and kind of the laws of physics to help us actually understand where there is some level of certainty within all of that. Scott then teed us up with one of the biggest problems we have, and that, of course, is that massive disconnect between what's going on in terms of the supply space and the people who are needing to buy things like those minerals and metals. And I've written down in my notes here, you can't have your cake and sorry, I will start again. You can't have your cake and eat it. So you can't have your metals and not pay the money for them whilst placing all these expectations on them. And I think there is perhaps a feeling within the supply chain of minerals and metals that's there at the moment. And it's not just in the primary raw materials, it's also everything in secondary raw materials as well, and the recycling and the repurposing, etc. So that world as well. Baduri dialed in from her office in Nigeria, and wow, did she give us insight. And that was insight from someone who is there on the ground at the moment. And she sent a note to apologize, to say, unfortunately, one of those amazing people has called her up. So she's engaging in one of those stakeholder meetings at the moment. But things like visible fairness, trust is operational infrastructure, and we don't build certainty by removing uncertainty. So, of course, it is more complicated than that. Mukesh then showed us how we can use things like AI and machine learning to understand these vast data sets. And I think Matt then built very much on top of this. So there are lots of companies that are out there at the moment that are saying that they can do this, but actually it's not just about the AI, the machine learning. You also need to have someone who knows what they're talking about sitting alongside that and using those tools. And of course, Aileen gave us an insight into the world of diversity, which has very much been a continuing theme throughout this year's conference, in that we all see the world through different perspectives. How do we listen and respect one another enough so that we can not only begin to understand that, but use that curiosity and that inspiration to actually think about the world in a different way? So, having tried to give that sum up, hopefully that's given you all enough time to think, what do I think I might want to share with everybody? I don't know, Scott, maybe if I can come to yourself first, what kind of thoughts are sitting there in your mind right now? And then I'll go to Cara.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. It always blows me away whenever I join panel discussions like this and I see all different parts of the mining community, miners and metals community, sort of talking from their perspectives and their roles. I think a lot of the, let's say, misunderstanding, I think, of mining, everyone thinks it's just digging rocks from the ground and then that's it. That's all that happens. And actually, the veins of mining is actually huge, right? And coming from South Africa myself, I mean, it's a mining country, right? We see the impacts it has on both our economies, our societies, everything around those mines. It has a huge, unbelievable impact that I think really goes unrecognized. The other thing I think is everyone believes that mining is a dirty word, right? And that it's a dirty industry. And yes, to a large part, that's true. But if you can't grow it, you have to dig it. It's as simple as that. Yet we have people on this call and all around the world trying to make it a better industry, a more efficient industry, a more cost-effective industry. And as I mentioned in my presentation, to make it more regionalized, right? And that benefits also local local populations and local communities. So yeah, for me it was just a fascinating conversation to hear from everyone's perspectives. For me, I've definitely taken a lot away in terms of the work that we do here at Project Blue, and also just thinking of my previous experience being in the industry myself. So again, yeah, thank you very much for inviting me today, and yeah, well done to everyone on really fantastic, insightful presentations.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Scott. Cara, how about yourself? Some thoughts, reflections, and then we'll go to Matt.
Yeah, one of the main themes that's sitting with me that came through in quite a few of the talks was in relation to leadership and what role that plays in terms of, I think Freud mentioned how important it is to ask those questions. And I know from my perspective as someone maybe earlier on in their career that having that perspective of the wider consideration that maybe I'm more in tune to the technical aspect, but when you hear someone higher up in the team or the company asking those questions for further clarification or just considering things more than what I'm doing, and that feeds into what you're all discussing in terms of where you start isn't necessarily the stream where you're going to end up, and that's okay, and there's such benefit in not being stuck in what you think is all you know.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, not being stuck in what you think you know
Yeah.
and being open to surprises, because there are always things that will take you by surprise. And I don't know, I know we're coming to Matt next, but Freud, as I saw you smiling there, in terms of that, sometimes those surprises, they're not big surprises, they're all like, oh, I just hadn't seen it from that perspective before. That's a good one. I will remember that for next time. But Matt, over to yourself, and then we'll go to Aileen.
Yeah, I think it's embracing that, uh, being honest, like exactly what you said, Cara, about that, being comfortable in not knowing everything. I think it goes back to what I say about that specialization is we're taught to like who's got the best exam results, who's got 100%. It's not about that. Who cares actually? No one cares. And there's something that I always find really rewarding about being humbled when you find or you realize, oh, hang on, an alien reminded us about all of the biases we have. It's like, oh yeah, there's something about being inquisitive and investigating and finding those connections. Like there's just something that like a spark goes off my brain when I can just connect two different things that are from different specialisms. You're like, wow, there's a real connection there. That's amazing. And that happens with people, with ideas and concepts. And I think that's the way that we build a more responsible, equitable future, is kind of embracing that side of it. So yeah, certainty is never going to happen.
Thanks, Matt. Eileen, over to you. And then Maduri, who we've got back. Brilliant. If you've got any final comments you'd like to make, Maduri, we'll bring you into the conversation. Aileen.
Yeah, I think actually building on Matt, I think certainty is not something we actually want in a lot of cases as well. I think it can take away from those opportunities. And I know my brother said it yesterday as well about like when you reach certainty, that's where the risk can occur because you kind of reach that like stagnation almost. So you're not thinking in advance of what can happen and what could potentially impact you. And I think that's so relevant to every project or whatever way of thinking. But I think sometimes we forget like geology and geosciences and all the related are such a like an area of curiosity and such an opportunity. Like I didn't really know anything about geology before accidentally going into it, and there's such a like wealth of directions you can take, and it's so connected. Like it is actually just all of the different sectors, all the different disciplines, and all social and technical built together. And I think sometimes we forget that, and I think other people outside forget that as well. Like it's really one of the more connected ones. I think also like just to reiterate what some other people had said, like the world is always changing, so we need to be able to adapt with it. And like the only thing constant is change. And so we heard that really nicely, I think, in this session. And one thing I think we heard from the social perspectives and just kind of technical, it's like this is a really cool opportunity for all of us to come together be it within or outside geosciences, because together we're unstoppable. But it's just making sure that we do that in a way that no one's left behind, I think, as well, which again takes that moment of like reflection. But yeah, some incredible talks, I think, this conference.
Thanks very much, Aileen. Now, Midori has been dipping in and out. We've seen you reappear, I think, on every device that you've got to your hands. If you want to come off mute and share any final thoughts with us, Midori, and then we'll go to Freudis.
Hi. I'm sure I've been disrupting people with the in and out, in and out. I'm at site, fortunately, so sorry about that, the network. Just for any person trying to venture into mining or into the space, just put it at the back of your mind, a reminder that you also need to ensure that you're not factoring your stakeholders, that's your community, as an add-on, but they should be embedded in the entire project itself already from beginning to the end. That's all.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Midori. And yeah, that is certainly a very, very core theme that's been running through this week. How you do that is more difficult than it is to say it. But you provided us with some fantastic examples of how you've been doing it. So brilliant. Thank you for that. Freudis, over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. I just want to say it's been lovely listening to all of you, really insightful. I've learned so much, so thank you. Midori, I worked in Nigeria in the Delta about 30 years ago, and it's kind of same. It's all about the stakeholder management. And as you so eloquently said, Nigeria isn't just one country, it's all sorts of different regions that are really, really different. And I think we need to keep remembering that. And I always remember talking to, when I was in the exploration geologies team at Anglo, talking about stakeholders and engagement. So again, the priority that you need to really lean into that. And I said, look, you wouldn't just take a drill rig and just drill a hole without doing your sampling, your geophysics. You need a bunch of data to actually help you define those targets. So why would you just randomly go into a community and talk to whoever? You need to understand the context, understand the culture, work out, who do you talk to first? Sequences matter when you're engaging with people. Who does the engagement? How you do the engagement? All of these things are really, really important. And I sometimes smile that in the sort of social space, I was doing a lot of community relations. They called it the non-technical areas, although there's so much technical skill needed in all of those areas as well. So I think my final thoughts is that how I just love the fact that all of your conference titles, Sarah, when you went through it at the beginning, it really shows how dynamic the context is and what the focus areas have been year after year, and how sort of spot on you guys have targeted the conversations. And I think we always need to learn from history and from the past, and then continue to be open, because only if we're open and curious can we help shape the future on those foundations as well. So thanks.
Beautiful words, Freudis. Thank you very much. I think with that, please everyone put your hands together for our phenomenal panel of speakers that we've had at our final session. Absolutely brilliant. And I think that leads us into our final summing up for the entire conference. So firstly, not only thank you to our wonderful speakers from today, but we've had 48 people come and share their thoughts, feelings, perspectives over the last few days. It's been absolutely brilliant. And it's something, looking at Aileen when we were first putting together this year's conference, we thought, oh no, we'll keep it really simple on ourselves. We'll only do 4 sessions. But then we realized that I couldn't count, and I'd invited too many people and they'd all said yes to come and speak. So we had to expand it to 6 sessions. And then we still got people phoning us up and saying, oh, I missed your email. I'd really like to come and share in this year's conference. But massive thank you to everybody who's been sharing with us. And the good news is that whilst we talk about this every year, we go, oh, that was awesome. Like, what are we going to do with it? What comes next? I mean, we've done a lot of talking today, and where's the action? Well, after a lot of requests, we are indeed creating the Responsible Raw Materials podcast, and this goes live today. So what you will see on the website is you will see a link to the podcast, and that will be going live today. And this really builds on all that we've been learning across the last 7 conferences. And what you get to explore or listen to are conversations with some of our phenomenal speakers. Now, each of the speakers that we've been working with this week, they've been asked, would you be interested in joining us on the podcast? And most of them have said yes, which means we've got an awful lot of work to do in terms of those. But it's amazing being able to take this into something that lives longer after this particular week of conversations. Also, as well, as always, the conversations will sit there on the internet. So we've got well over 400 talks now from across the last 7 conferences, which is phenomenal. And I personally, I still go back to those different talks. And when someone comes and asks me, Sarah, can you teach me about artisanal and small scale mining? I'll say, well, yeah, we can certainly have a conversation. But what I seriously recommend you do is take half an hour to go and look at these 3 talks. This one, this one, this one. And I'll send them links to those talks, because then you get to hear not just from me and what I've assimilated in my brain and how I happen to be feeling on that day, but actually people who really, really know what they're talking about. And to be honest, are actually artisanal small scale miners themselves. Because what right do I have to speak about that? So I'll give you my perspective secondhand, but what does it look like when you actually go and listen to people and engage with people and try and get your heads around what does the world look like through their eyes? And that's so important. So yeah, 48 speakers this week from all over the world, which is always absolutely brilliant. Leaning into what Aileen was talking about, our diversity has been rubbish because we've been so overladen with girls. Is that a problem? No, I don't think it is. Thank you very much to Matt and Scott for making this more diverse in today's session. But this is something as well where ever since the beginning, we've made sure that we've had as much diversity as possible and actually used the conference to show other conferences that it is very, very possible to have diverse conversations. Just because a lot of the leadership positions in certain sectors around the world might be dominated by people who look and sound like something that's similar doesn't mean to say with a little bit of digging, you can't find people who will give different perspectives that are just as valuable as well. So thank you very much to everyone who has been putting that together as well. It's very possible to do. With that, a massive thank you to the team behind the scenes. Aileen, without you, this would not have happened. Massive, massive thank you. And thank you for putting up with me when I kept inviting additional people. But it's been absolutely brilliant. The reason why this conference has happened this year is because of Aileen. We've also had the phenomenal Miranda. So thank you very much, Miranda. And then Helen, who's not on the screen at the moment, who has been doing a lot of the editing of the videos and uploading. And then we've got the broader team as well. So Joss, Matt, everybody else behind the scenes, thank you very much to you, because I know that we've all put in a lot of work to make it happen. And of course to Rose, who, as we said at the beginning, keeps having children at awkward times of the year so she doesn't have to do the conference. Rose, we know you've moved into a brand new house that has lots of bedrooms and you've threatened to have 10 children. Well, that just means we have to keep running this conference for years and years and years until we get you back. But as always, Rose, we miss you, but this conference is for your latest little one, as always. So finally, certain thoughts from throughout this week. So this year's conference, we titled it Creating Certainty in a Changing World. And we did that intentionally, provocatively, because one thing that perhaps we've learned over the years is you don't want to put out a title that everyone agrees with. You want to include things in there that someone can throw rocks at, because then you get a much more exciting discussion. And boy, have we got that. So everyone's there going, what are you talking about certainty, Sarah, you idiot? Well, great. Let's discuss that. Let's actually peel back that lid and try and understand what's really going on there. And we started out the conference by listening to 4 students from the University of Oxford, who all gave their perspectives as to what were some of those key areas of uncertainty or change going on in the world right now. And that was great, because so rarely do we start out by going, right, let's listen to students. Let's start the conference by listening to students. And that was absolutely awesome. We were also truly shaken to our cause by Isabel's talk on the death of truth. But more than that, she provided us with a framework. So I think that people who have been trained in like science or engineering or whatever quite often need a framework to go, well, what's actually happening here? And so I think that's a case where it's still sitting in the back of my brain thinking, oh my goodness, what does this mean? But it was brilliant because it's really helping me to not reduce any of the uncertainty, but to begin to comprehend what might actually be going on in the world right now, especially with all of this information that we are just drowning in. And of course, we're currently adding to as well. With that, of course, that led us into the world of values and how different people value the world in different ways. So often do we just talk about things in terms of money or have we delivered this project on time? But we had lots of discussion about different types of governance structure. So it's not just about, as Madhuri was saying, you've got your federal government, your state government, etc. But then you've also got the more traditional governance, such as different tribal structures, etc. So what does that look like and how do they interact? And just because you've got a piece of paper from one type of governance structure doesn't mean to say you have permission from the other aspects of that. And that, of course, is made more complicated because people see the world in different ways and describe it in different ways. And I think that comes through very clearly in some of the talks we had with regards to values. So with this, I think as well, we're talking about how do people make decisions in different parts of the world. And again, some of our talks around, okay, how does the American government make decisions? How does the UK government make decisions? What about Zambia? What about Botswana, etc.? And trying to get our heads around, oh, hang on a second, we might be speaking the same language, but we do things in totally different ways. So how do we get our heads around that? And of course, it's not just the US, the UK, Europe, Australia, Africa, etc. The real rise of Latin America, the vast majority, so whilst Matt said, statistically speaking, you want to build a project in Africa, the vast majority of attention right now is on Latin America. And that's really, really interesting. And we've had some great talks coming through from Latin America and people who are living there, building these projects, engaged in those processes, and really, really deeply working on how do we make sure that different people who live in those areas from an Indigenous perspective, etc., are truly put at the core of those projects and very much upfront rather than an afterthought that has sometimes been the case. And then finally, we've had lots of talks that have looked at how do we use tools that we've never had before to make use of all of these big data sets. And I think this is something that's really, really, really exciting. For the first time ever, we have the capability to assimilate, interrogate, and use vast data sets. We've never been able to do this before. The changes and the evolutions in AI and machine learning are astounding. And that's something there where, for the first time ever, we can actually use these data sets to help us understand the context of what is going on, which brings us all the way back to what Freudis was saying at the very beginning of today's session. It is indeed all about understanding and having the guts, the courage to try and look at our context and how it is changing. And we've had the ability to do this like never before. We've got better communication, we've got better data sets, and we've got the ability to actually understand them as well. So with that, I think this is a case here of, yes, everybody is correct. We're not trying to create certainty, but we are trying to navigate that uncertainty. And perhaps we are at that tipping point right now where instead of just incrementally improving how we've done things in the past, perhaps now is the time to totally reimagine how we provide these materials. Perhaps now is the time where we can put society at the center of all of this rather than as the afterthought, because we've got the ability to do it now, whereas perhaps in the past it was a difficult thing to do. So with that, everybody, thank you so much for joining us this week. It's been another phenomenal set of sessions. We hope you enjoy all the videos online. Look out for the podcast. And if you've got other ideas for us, please do feel free to feed them through. So with that, thank you very much to everyone, and we'll see you next year. Thank you.